head comes back down. Anyway, you met Ryan Kettleson. Thanks very much for inviting us here. And welcome to, you've been a Libertarian for a long time, so you've been a Libertarian longer than I have. Well, I'm not a professional politician, but I'm a fourth-generation Iowan. And basically, in every year of my life, and in every year of the 4 generations of my family in Iowa, the government of Iowa has grown. And what's the problem with that? Well, as the government grows, the private sector shrinks, and we all get poor. I mean, every one of us, you're a business person, every one of us loses on that proposition. And right now, you get to a tipping point where you just can't stand any more government growth. It's estimated that for every government job, we lose 2 in the private sector. This governor, a Republican governor, just passed or is about to pass the largest budget in the history of Iowa and the largest budget increase in the history of Iowa. When this goes through, every one of us, every man, woman, and child, even you, Jack, you now owe $2,300 to the state of Iowa every year. But because kids don't pay and a lot of adults don't pay, it falls on the small businesses primarily. To get ahead on the economic ladder, it doesn't matter where you are on the economic scale, to get ahead, you need to be in a society that actually produces things. You need to produce food, clothing, shelter, transportation, medical care, you name it, widgets, all sorts of the stuff we used to make. The problem is that government doesn't produce any of those things. Government only produces 2 things. It produces taxation and it produces regulation. Now, the taxation is going to, when you get to be 18 and have a job, you'll find out when you're 16, the taxation takes money right out of your pocket. Regulation actually is probably even worse at this point. The Competitive Enterprise Institute, for the first time this year, has said that regulations in America cost people more than their taxes. Because regulations make it harder for you to get a job, and it makes your job very, very inefficient. So it makes it, it's like regulations it's like an engine that just puts off heat, doesn't put you forward. And I'm going to tell you a little story a little bit later about my friend who's a meat market guy in Lake City, Iowa, where I am, and how he's about to be put out of work specifically because of the state government. There's no other reason. He's got plenty of customers, he's got great bacon, I go in there all the time for that, but he can't get through the regulation and the taxation. It specifically damages small business, and that's where most of the jobs come from. Now, what's our biggest export to South Dakota? It's jobs and businesses. Why? Because South Dakota has no state income tax, and it's number 1 on the freedom scale. In other words, it's the least regulated. Iowa, we're number 5. If you look at local and state taxes, we're number 5 from the top. I mean, we're creeping up there with California and California and New York. And if you look at regulations, we're in the bottom 2/3. I mean, we're very, very regulated. So, we need to turn this around. And the problem with the government, once it starts growing, it just gets bigger and bigger, and it doesn't have any external restraints. That's a big problem. Now, specifically, when you look at what we can actually do, the first thing we need to do, and this, as a governor, you're not the czar, you can't do everything, but the first thing we need to do to get us back on track, to shrink government, is we need to get rid of Common Core, which is a horrible educational system that the federal government's bringing to us, and we need to really reassess our need for the Department of Education and what it does for our funding and cost of school, and cost in value, and we absolutely cannot afford Obamacare. The governor didn't have to accept state exchanges. I actually wrote to him, and I know he got the letter, it was hand-carried to him before this, and I said, do not accept the state exchanges. If the Fed set up the exchanges, bad enough. But if you set up the exchange, it costs thousands of dollars of fines per employee for these businesses, and it's just going to break the bank. Des Moines is going to start growing into this great big center where all these bureaucrats are looking into your bank account, looking into your jobs, because they have to determine who gets what in Obamacare. You really can't afford it. And I just discovered in my own life, my son's insurance went up 400%. The problem, and what I just learned about Obamacare, the dirty little secret is, when we used to do Medicaid for the poor, what you used to do is pay your taxes into the government parceled out that Medicaid dollars, and they gave it to doctors and hospitals at a low rate. It didn't pay for the service we gave, but at least it was kind of shared charity. I'm not saying it was a good system, but that's the way it worked. Okay, now what's going to happen is, your taxes still go into government. Now the government is going to buy an insurance policy at 300 to 400% of the market value. If anybody thinks that's an economic model we can sustain, this is crazy. And so that absolutely, if we're going to save the state, that absolutely has to go. And, I hadn't planned on being in this position, and I hadn't planned on doing this, but when the Libertarian Party came to me and said, we're really interested in you doing it because you understand Obamacare, you know, I have 2 boys, and I said, they can't inherit this. This is a system that's about to go down, and we don't have another generation to go. I mean, we really have to start doing something different, or we don't have our light on our Mark Twain quote. I'll let you say that.
Just flip the thing down front.
Oh, I see. Yeah. You know, Mark Twain's point. If you don't change direction, you may end up where you're headed. You know, I mean, that's really true. And so, you know, one of the big problems, and I understand, I used to sit there, and I used to be a Republican, I'm a recovering Republican, I used to sit there saying, very good, yeah, I love what you're saying, but I could never vote for this person that isn't a Republican or Democrat, because I don't want that guy to win. Whichever party it is, you don't want that guy to win. But here is really the dirty little secret. The dirty little secret is, it doesn't matter which one of those guys, because they're the same. They're driving us down a road that's going to turn Des Moines into Detroit. You know, people don't remember that Detroit in 1955 was the most powerful economic city in America. And look at it today. It's a bombed-out shell. It's horrible. Now, it's interesting. I don't know if you've seen that email, but there's a great email going around, and it shows Hiroshima, where we dropped the atomic bomb, and then it shows Detroit, and it says which is worse. And it turns out 50 years of bad government is worse than the dropping the atomic bomb on it. I was stationed over there. It's a beautiful, flourishing city. The problem is that both the Democrats and Republicans, they're driving down the road to Detroit by growing government, because it just can't, we don't have enough private industry to just keep sustaining it. They may be at a little different rate, and they might be one's a little ahead of the other, but they're driving down the same road. And here's the other dirty little secret is, in private, or in public, they're like magicians. They're arguing about economics, they're arguing about social issues, they get us all excited about this stuff over here as if they're different. But in private, talk to any of your legislators, and we hope you'll find this out, but you won't do this. In private, they're legislating together to grow government and pick your pocket. So if you keep voting the same way, you're going to keep having the same result. And that's really, what I'm really here to say to you today is that we want you to be more attached to your freedom and less attached to your political party, whatever one that is, because you really can't afford the other guys. If you want a bumper sticker that says that, we have those too. So anyway, with that, I'm going to let you take over and show them why we can actually win this. I'm going to sit here.
I think I've met most of you, but my name is Ryan Kettleson, and I'm the individual who's running as the candidate for Lieutenant Governor with Dr. Hieb. Matt asked already, but just to let the rest of you know a little bit about my background. I actually have a business management and administration degree from William Penn University down in Oskaloosa, and I've been in business management all my life, and with more of a focus on accounting and finance. And a lot of people find that boring, but numbers have always been like a puzzle to me, so I'm really infatuated with solving those types of problems. And so, just to kind of keep it brief, most of my history of my career has been going into companies that have been struggling. Either they've got a department that's not functioning properly, or the whole company itself hasn't been functioning properly. So my job was to go in and find the problems, make things more efficient, streamline it, and to get it turned around and to make it profitable. So that's just kind of a quick little bit about my background. And I guess what I bring to the campaign is, as Lieutenant Governor, that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at the state level is, you know, there's a lot of things that aren't working efficiently or effectively, so we're going to look at better ways of doing that, better ways to streamline things. Some programs we're talking about just eliminating altogether just because they're bad for Iowans, they're bad for Iowans who are paying taxes to support those bad programs. So we touched on that already. So we're libertarians, unfortunately.
That's what they say. That's how they care.
This is what people think. They think of, you know, some tinfoil hat wearing nut job is kind of how I turn it. But that has changed significantly and within recent history here. And this is who libertarians actually are. I mean, they're college students, they're insurance agents, they're fast food workers, they're engineers, surgeons, TV hosts, Drew Carey, of course. They're newsmen, radio hosts, magicians, and economists, and actors. And so, a pretty broad spectrum of what libertarians really are, and they're just like you and me. I mean, they're normal people. So, and right now, interestingly enough, the Gallup poll put out a recent survey result that said 65% of all Americans are completely frustrated with both the Democratic and the Republican parties, and they don't like either one of them, and they're ready for change. You know, so and you know, this is what people hear a lot is from both the Democrats and the Republicans. You hear, you got to vote for him or me, otherwise you're just going to waste your vote. But that's not true, and so just briefly, what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is, why we really stand a good chance of winning the race for governor and lieutenant governor. So, as Dr. Hieb mentioned, really Democrats and Republicans, they're doing the same thing. And just, to recap quickly, they argue about economic and social issues, but really behind the scenes, they're, working with each other to grow government. And I think that's actually where you get, we all hear about the pork that comes through on bills where, people have been promised certain things, and that's what they're doing. They're promising each other favors to help each other grow government, or the government that they want. So we actually refer to them as the Republicrats, and that's something Dr. Hieb coined. But, what have the Democrats and the Republicans given us over history? And this is obviously at the federal level, but it's easy for people to understand. I mean, they've given us the United States Postal Service, and how's it doing? It's broke.
They want to make it a bank, too.
Yes, exactly. They brought us Social Security, and both parties have raided that fund, and now it's in essence broke. It's the same thing with Medicare and Fannie Mae. Heck, they brought us a $787 billion stimulus. As I said, I'll let you be the judge of its success. But its success is what we're dealing with right now today. And from my perspective, I don't think it worked. So can we win? From my perspective, the answer is absolutely we can. Right now, a third of Iowans are registered either as independent or libertarian, and they recently got a problem fixed at the Secretary of State's office, right, and the Department of Motor Vehicles that allow people to actually register as a libertarian now, and it'll actually show up accurately, because before it either showed up as no party, or I think it actually showed up as an independent now. So how is it that we're going to win? And I want to talk to you about these latest polls that have come out. The poll that they did was they called, they called a cross-section across the state of Iowa. They asked people, would you be willing to vote for Terry Branstad or Jack Hatch? So that was the question. And interestingly enough, what you'll hear on the news is you'll hear about Branstad's approval rating, which right now is at 63%. And so that's what they'll talk about all the time, is how Branstad's got a 63% approval rating. He's going to sweep this election. But the reality of it is that I'm not sure that he will, because the people that were surveyed, only 44% of them said that they were actually willing to vote for Branstad again. And on the same survey, 29% said that they would be willing to vote for Jack Hatch. Now, most people aren't into numbers the way I am, so I told Dr. Hieb, I said, I'll just simplify this. This won't work out exactly like this, but just to keep it simple so that you can follow along. If we take 6% from both parties, then we'll win. That'll give us the numbers. If we pull 6% away from the 44% that Branstad has, if we pull 6% away from the numbers that Jack Hatch has, that gives us enough of the numbers that the independents and libertarians have, that other 27%, that gives us enough to actually win the election. And again, that's way oversimplified, and the numbers won't quite work out that way. But because of the frustration coming from both the Democratic and the Republican Party members, I think this is very doable. I mean, as soon as Dr. Hieb was on the radio a month ago, there was just a huge onslaught of Democrats calling us, which surprised me more than anything, saying, oh my gosh, it's so refreshing to hear what you have to say, and we're behind you, 100%. We'll vote for you. And the same thing from the people in the Republican Party. So that's all it'll take. It's not going to take much, and that's part of what we're doing now. I talked about that earlier. We're taking the next 60 days to 90 days to really get out there and let people know that we're here, that we're not that tinfoil hat wearing guy that you saw, at the beginning of the slideshow. We're normal people. Dr. Hieb's a professional, an orthopedic surgeon. I'm a professional. I've been business executive in several large corporations, and we have the experience and the skill set that it's going to take to get Iowa turned around, and so we're asking for that opportunity. So what do we need to do to get there? Well, we're simply asking people to do three actions, and that's to join what we call our 10,000 by 20 club. And what we're doing as we're out spreading this message, and we'd ask you to maybe help spread the same message, is we're simply asking for 10,000 Iowans to just donate $20 to our campaign. Fortunately, I have a lot of connections, and Dr. Hieb and I have sat down and we've come up with a marketing campaign. We cannot compete, obviously, with Terry Branstad's $4 million that he has, but we've come up with a marketing game plan that we are confident will allow us to win. And we can do that if we can get this 10,000 by 20 club funded. Consider hosting a fundraiser. I mean, if you can get a group of people together, Dr. Hieb and I are more than willing to travel to you to meet with people, and you know, and the fundraiser can be around the 10,000 by 20 club. I mean, just let people know, hey, we want you to join this, and even better yet, we're going to have a little party here at our house or at the community center like this, and have people come in, and if they, you know, would be willing to join our club. And then the other thing is, this is part of our marketing strategy, is you're not going to see constant repeated ads on television that you are becoming annoyed with. We're actually asking you to enlist in our e-campaign because we're taking this electronic. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Please go to our website and sign up for our email list because that's how we want to communicate with people. You know, the message gets out faster when people are passing things on. It's almost like the chain letters, you know, if you remember those, or the calling, you know, tree on phones. When friends get an email and they pass that on to their friends, it has a tendency to get passed on more, and they also have a tendency to be looked at more, and there's just more credibility there.
So at the bottom of the chain letters, you know how it said you need to pass this on to 10 people, or something bad will happen.
Yeah, something bad.
You
Well,
want to
that's actually pretty accurate.
pass this on to 10 people, or you'll be stuck with the same.
I like that.
Absolutely,
I like
because there's a
that.
lot of truth to
Yeah.
that. There's a lot of truth
You
to
just
that.
become our PR manager. That's good.
But those three simple actions, I mean, we just simplified it that these three actions will actually help get us elected. You know, I like to use the word guarantee, but that's pretty strong. But I'm very confident that, you know, if we get these things in place, we'll take the governor and lieutenant governor's seat. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up there because I know you want to get going, but I want Dr. Hieb to just kind of say some last words.
Yeah, or answer any
Actually,
questions.
it did change.
Oh, it did? Okay. Well, I felt like gosh, we're
His
holding him up.
friend that was coordinating something went from 6 o'clock to 5 o'clock to 7:30.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
well, good.
good.
You're here for questions, Bill.
So,
Yeah, you know, I'm just going to tell you the other final point, and this is one of the reasons I became a Libertarian long before I thought I was going to be standing here doing this. And that is that Ed Wright, who was at that time the chairman of the Libertarian Party, said to me, he said, you know, even if our candidates don't always win, I am just not morally comfortable anymore with voting for people that are going to enslave my children and future grandchildren with taxation and regulation. And I think that's really, you know, I got to that point before I got to the point, okay, now let's actually work to take back the state. But the first thing is, I'm just not going to let my kids be enslaved anymore to this, if I can at all help it. And I think one of the challenges we have with my kids are in their 20s. You know, I got two boys, they're in their 20s, and one of the challenges that we've got today, I think, is that that generation has seen what government's done, has seen all this, the corruption, the incessant growth in their lives. They say, we've never seen it turn around. It's never going to turn around. And they've kind of become fatalistic. And we need to grab those guys and say, if you don't do anything, then you're a self-fulfilling prophecy. Get involved in something. Get involved in this. Let's turn it around. But again, it's not going to turn around. And we don't have we actually do have a two-party in this race. It's the status quo or it's us. So, any questions on anything you want to talk about?
What were you talking about that you worked with the Secretary of State's office? What did you do?
Well, there's a problem with the Department of Motor Vehicles, and really this has to be credited back to Jake Porter, who is our Libertarian candidate running for the Secretary of State's office. But when you would go into the DMV to get your license renewed, you know, they ask your question, you know, is your address the same?
Right,
you know,
right.
And then they would say, if you want to register for a party, well, the people that would say Libertarian, it wasn't actually showing up. It was either listing no party,
Right.
or it was
Okay.
listing, I think, independent.
I didn't know that that was the one through the Secretary of State. The other thing you might want to try to get off is and I don't even like it, is the all Democrat and all Republican. What is it?
Slate
The line ballots where you vote all R or all D, the whole way
Vote
down.
by the slate or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
where you vote straight ticket, is that
Straight
exactly
ticket,
right? Yeah, okay.
That's the term.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because nothing is going to change unless we get rid of that. And, I mean, it's going to be hard to do because Republicans and Democrats are both. So that's when you said Secretary of State's office, I didn't know if
Well, that
they
is
have the
something-
power to be able to do that. I know, but it's just,
No, I know your point.
It teaches people to just vote stupid.
I totally agree.
Well, I think it's, I kind of hesitate to say, sometimes I think it can potentially be a lazy way to vote, because it's, I can just check one box and I've voted for all the Democrats, or I voted for all the Republicans, and I guess one of the things we actually need to look on there is that, are there an option for the others?
Yeah.
Can we vote straight? Because I don't vote straight ticket. I mean, I go through and I vote for the people who I think are going to do the best job for us, and I don't know if there's even an option to vote.
Yeah, but the parties really push back.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
huge.
gonna eliminate the third
And I
party.
mean, yeah, and so it eliminates chances for somebody else
That's a
to
good
get
point,
in
and
there.
we'll
That
have
needs to get off the
Yeah.
ballot.
I know, because I've even been guilty of doing
I
that,
have
and
done that
Well, and
long
Jake's
time
coming,
ago
is
when I was stupid.
Jake coming next week to talk?
no,
We
that's,
guess-
that's a different guy.
Okay, well, whenever you guys set it up, that is an issue, we will bring it up to him, but that's an issue to bring up to Jake, because, he's very involved with that.
Well, he certainly can find out what it would take to
And
get
he,
that
yeah, what it
off.
would take to get it off. And I'm not sure at what level that's been put on.
Right.
I don't know. But,
The good news, though, is, because I hear your frustration of with those on there, the good news is that with 65% of the country just frustrated with what Democrats and Republicans are doing to us, or not doing for us, I think people are this election are going to move away from just the straight ticket voting. I mean, I really think people are going to, I think a lot of people, which, I think has brought, people here tonight, I think people are saying, I'm not voting straight ticket, I'm going to find out who's out there, I'm going to find out who's out there for us and not special interest groups, or people who, my big thing is I've said, stop voting for incumbents. First of all, that's how you implement your own term limit, and, the second thing is, they continue to promise and promise and promise, but they never deliver, and so it's time to go in a new direction, and I think a lot of people feel that way. I think 65% of the country feels that way, and so I think there's going to be a lot of upsets and a lot of change this election cycle, so I'm very excited for it.
well, and the other thing is, I think people are ready for somebody that will push the feds back from our shore. What's happening out at the Bundy Ranch, what's happening nationwide. I mean, we've got little issues of eminent domain in the state of Iowa. We don't have any federal land. But Common Core is a perfect example of the feds coming in and putting something down in place that they have no constitutional authority to do. And this governor just accepts whatever the Republican Party tells him to accept, unfortunately. And we have everyone
Unless it's
saying that.
Paul.
Well, they didn't tell, but see, the party didn't tell him to accept that. But when the party tells him to do other things, he just says he does. But anyway, I'm just saying that the problem I think we have is that we have, it's kind of a multi-pronged thing. But it's interesting, I like this going on already. Other states with a little bit more spine, and I did say at one time, I said, I am a spine surgeon, I'll offer to give you guys a little bit of spine, but my cards, our legislators didn't take me up on that. But, there are states that are getting a spine. Missouri, it hasn't made it through the Senate, I don't think yet, but their lower house just passed a bill that says we nullify all federal gun laws, past, present, and future, because they're unconstitutional. And I think they think it's going to pass the whole state. The other thing that just happened, I think, is also good is, we have, Sioux City has lost people and jobs over to South Dakota. So a lot of people that work maybe in Sioux City, they live in South Dakota where there's no income tax, which should be a cue to what we need to do. But in any case, so people are getting caught on those red light cameras, and they're driving over to Sioux Falls to live in South Dakota. And what we've done in the past is the government of South Dakota has furnished our Iowa Highway Patrol with the names of those license plates that they're taking pictures of. And South Dakota just told us to go take a hike. Said, no, we're not doing that. We don't think it's constitutional. Good for them. But that's why they're number one on the freedom scale. And we're way down there. And I don't know if you know I don't know what ALEC actually stands for, but it's the map of the United States. It's a map of the United States they come out with every year, and it shows how states are changing economically. And I'm sorry to tell you that we are stagnant slightly down. And we are 24th from the top overall in our taxation and, giving money to the government, and we haven't gotten better. And if you look at, then it looks like states have gotten better, states have gotten worse, and states have stayed the same. If you look at the states that have gotten better, there are some of our neighbors, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Michigan, Indiana got significantly better. Those are the green states that are doing better, and they're close to us enough that we can lose jobs and businesses to them. And then there were states that got worse, predictably, Minnesota, but, you know, and Illinois is horrible. Illinois,
How can Texas do so well with no state income tax?
What's that?
They have no deficit, Texas, with no state
That's what
income
I'm gonna
tax.
get to. And if you look at, we actually have not gotten better, not gotten worse, we're at zero. But look at the states that are zero with it. It's New York and California and all these states that were doing well, and now we're kind of just zero, and now then it's going to go negative, and that's what's going to happen to us. And how they do well without the state income tax is people flock to live there. And I'm going to tell you a story in medicine about that, if you've ever heard of Dakota Dunes. Dakota Dunes, you know, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. There's a big group up there. It's orthopedic surgeons, neurosurgeons, physiatrists, I don't know, a couple other specialties, but they all, rheumatologists, they all got together and formed this big medical group. So what do? Well, they take care of the trauma, low-pay stuff in Sioux City, okay? But they built their big office complex Sioux Falls. They bought or across the river in that area there in South Dakota. They live in South Dakota. So it's a classic example. We just lost they make trailers from Lamar's, a big business that just moved to South Dakota. I mean, they go where the taxes are low. We have the highest, by the way, we have the highest corporate tax in the nation. So in addition to our personal income taxes, we have the highest corporate tax in the nation. Now, people say, for example, we need to increase one of the proposals, and by the way, there's two proposals on there, like the governor wants to increase the gas tax. Unfortunately, when you increase the gas tax, number one, it might help the main corridors, okay? Some of that money gets used for the main corridors. Thanks, Austin, for coming.
You're welcome. I'll be in touch.
Okay. And, but only, of the 52-cent gas tax, only 28% or something gets to the farm to market roads. Now, those are the roads that a lot of people travel, by the way, to get to work. And a lot of people have to drive out in the rural parts. They have to drive 30 miles to work. When you increase the gas tax, you make it harder for that guy to get to
Well,
work.
in Cedar Rapids, we just increased our own sales tax to fix our roads. So for the news to come out after the vote and say, oh, well, now they're talking about increasing the gas tax, that just aggravates people.
Well, of course, and I guess what I'm going to say is that what we're not capturing, one of the practical libertarian-type solutions here are user fees. If you're going to use the big highways, you pay a little bit more. So we have a lot of these big, long-distance truckers that are traveling across the state. We're not capturing their fees for using the road. So put some toll roads up. You know, with modern electronic chip technology, we could do it in such a way so the guy that's just traveling to work who's an island doesn't get dinged, but it picks up some extra revenue from these through transport trucks, people traveling across the state, north and south, and then use that directly on the roads. You know, there's still going to be an issue of apportionment, what roads get what, but at least it's not stopping people that have to drive to work a long distance. I think that's a big issue. And that's the way unfortunately, here's the other revelation I had when I became a libertarian, and that is that the government says, Governor Branstad says he's in the black. The government's in the black because we're not in debt. That's great, right? But we're in debt because we're putting more and more to keep him out of debt. And so government it's like the cottage industry that government does, it grows itself. But there's a lot of different reasons for this, because the way they budget is if you don't use your budget, you lose it the next year. So there's a built-in mechanism that you want to budget. The other thing that government has, there's three types of accounting, and it turns out that one of them is government accounting, and no tax attorney understands it because they said the problem with government accounting, it's unaccountable. You can just change the definitions. There's a law about how you have to do accounting, but the government authorizes itself to change the definitions so it meets the letter of the law, but is in fact uncontrolled. And the combination of those two things, and that people want to grow their jobs, make this work. I'm just going to tell you, I was on the Dan Michelson show this morning, and I talked about my friend who runs a meat market, and I was just going to tell you his story, because this is really exactly what's happening to Iowa. What's happening to Iowa is we are putting little businesses out of business because small business can't absorb the regulatory and the tax burden. Oh, fish.
There's fish.
There he is.
I'm serious as a heart attack. He's a doctor.
So anyway, I go in. I've been going in there buying fish, and one of the things that he said was, you can't believe the regulatory nightmare. One of the things that happened is, for example, he has shopping carts. These are metal shopping carts. They told him he can't have them anymore because he can't ensure that they're clean. He said, they never leave my premises. They're for the people who are getting their chickens and frozen things out of the locker. They never touch anything raw. He says, Walmart's carts go outside. Well, that's okay for Walmart, but not okay for him. He can't use them, okay? He just lost his Obamacare insurance. He lost his Blue Cross insurance. They paid privately for years because it became unaffordable under the Affordable Care Act. And, you gotta love that term, right? Then the government inspector came in, and he comes in every 3 months. And he was telling me how last time he came in, he went through once, didn't find anything. He went through again, he didn't find
go ahead.
anything. So he starts for the third time, and my friend says, John, why are you doing this? Why don't you go bother Tyson or something? Because obviously we're doing everything right here. And the inspector actually said to him, if I don't find something, I won't be able to come back for a year. Now think about that. I mean, that's a jobs program. That's not just checking for safety.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ted. But the final blow is workman's compensation tax. That's good. You guys have it. The final blow is workman's compensation tax. So he used to have 7 employees. Now he has just him and his wife. Why? Because he couldn't afford all these taxes and regulations. So he gets rid of everybody except him and his wife, but he still has to pay workman's compensation tax on himself. He just got a bill for $5,000 because the state says, oh, we're so sorry, but we just discovered that we were undercharging you for 4 years, and now it turns out you owe us $5,000. And he looks at me and he said, look, I can't pay, I don't have $5,000, this may put me out of business. And I said, now wait a minute, let me just get this right, because I'm self-employed, and I think you are too, I know you are. You can never, this is the kicker on this, he's going to go out of business maybe for a tax that he can never get the benefit from. In other words, when you pay into unemployment, you've got employees, when you pay into the workman's compensation fund, it's the idea that if somebody gets laid off, they can apply for unemployment, or if they get disabled or injured, they can apply for this. But see, you can't do that when you're self-employed. So every self-employed farmer, every self-employed business person has to, in the state of Iowa, and this is not true of other states, in the state of Iowa, you have to pay that tax for yourself, and you can never collect it under any circumstances. I've talked to them. You can never, because I can't fire myself. He can't fire himself, so he can never collect what he's being taxed out of business for. That is just criminal, That's just criminal. Another thing the regulatory body did for him was they came in and said, oh, your water is not satisfactory, because, when they sent in the sample, I think it sat around too long, but he's on city water. It's the same water the whole city drinks. It's okay for them, but they were going to put him out of business. And when they shut him down for 3 days, the people that rented his lockers have had nothing to do. He couldn't get to the locker space. This is government. Now, my meat market, if you go down Highway 30, you'll see all these little agribusinesses have been closed down. The meat market, the dairies, the chicken processors. There's only 5 chicken processors left in the state, and we're supposed to be the heartland of rural agriculture, right? They're all being shut down. And the tragedy is when you talk to the government. I called Governor Branstad's office one time, and I wrote letters back and forth to the Secretary of Agriculture about my friend at the meat market. And that was just before recently. This is when these regulations were just starting to hit. They don't recognize that they're doing it. I actually said to the Secretary of Agriculture's office, I told him about it, I said, you don't think you're bothering people? Are you kidding me? You shut down the meat market in the town where I live.
You're talking about the same agriculture that was governor of our state at one time, right?
Well, not now. It's the Secretary of Agriculture now is...
Bill Marley.
Well, back then
it was Bill Sack.
It was Culver. Or not Colbert, but Bill Sack.
Yeah, but now it's Northey.
Oh, okay.
So this is a Republican. No, I'm talking about a Republican.
Okay.
I don't keep picking on Republicans, except that I used to kind of believe as a former Republican, the Republicans tried to do this a little bit better and try to deregulate. But not only do they pass all these regulations, and they're unelected, but they don't realize the upshot of the regulations. So what they did is they come into these businesses, and we've lost several businesses in Harrison County, just in my town, which isn't that big, about this. They tell them, you have to bring your meat market up to code, today's standards, or you can't, or we're going to have to cite you. Well, he says, I can't do it. I don't have $30,000 to bring it up to code. Now, nobody was getting sick. Everybody was happy with the meat market, but now he's out of business. And when
Everybody probably loved it.
Yeah, everybody loved it. No, everybody loved it. Right, everybody loved it. And it's like I love my bacon from my guy in Lake City. But when I wrote to the Northey's office, when I wrote to the Secretary of Agriculture, the response I got back is, now, we looked into it, and it turns out he just voluntarily closed. And I wrote back, if you think it's voluntarily closure because you put a gun to his head and said, you have to do this or you're going to, we're going to cite you. That's not voluntary closure, guys. But they're kind of oblivious to that, and that's a big, huge problem. So, and here's the other thing is, when I called the governor's office about it, this is what not him, but his person said, his person who answers questions on the phone, I guess, said, well, we can't do anything about it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it's not Congress, it's not the legislators that are doing this, it's these unelected immortal boards. And I said, and you can't get rid of these unelected, no, we can't get rid of them. And I said, well, then why do I vote for you? And that's when I became a Libertarian. Why do I vote for you? And it's not true, I think, that he can't do something. Because, you see, these guys really aren't immoral. There's a signature somewhere in some piece of paper that grants authority to that board. And what we need to do is get to the heart of that and start unsigning those suckers.
If the board even has authority.
Yeah, if the board doesn't have authority. Now, you know, on the other hand, there's a lot of things that are happening, like this retrograde tax. Have you heard about that one? That's great. There was a tax imposed, I don't know how many years ago, on the sale of large equipment in the state. Again, doesn't really benefit anybody, just another money grab to the state. Well, it turns out that the legislature accidentally let it go, accidentally somehow undid this tax law. But they've been continuing to collect the tax on it to the tune of $20-some million. Well, somebody called them on it and said, hey, wait a minute, you've been taking my money and all these sales taxes. It turns out that law hasn't been enforced for years. Well, instead of giving the money back, which government never wants to do, they just wrote a law that said, oh, we're going to tax you all the way back to, we're just going to write a retrograde tax that goes back to that, where we accidentally got rid of the tax law. Now, think about that. What that is, that's a direct violation of the Constitution. There's an ex post facto in the Constitution says you can't write laws that work in retrospect, you know, and that's exactly what they're doing. But beyond that, think of the precedent. What that precedent sets is, okay, we just discovered that the government's a little bit short, we're a little short this year in our funding for all this stuff. We're going to go into the red, so here's what we'll do. We'll just retroactively increase the income tax a couple %, and then we can fill our shortfall. Wouldn't that be wonderful? You know? Or maybe, yeah.
Don't you agree that, though, with anything that requires constitutional, what's right and what's wrong with the Constitution, if it goes to the Supreme Court, ends up being political no matter what? There's a 5-4 vote. Only current presidents can put them in. That's why they want to retire before they're in. So is it the